you ready? Okay, then we're going to call this. We're going to call this Saline City Council special work meeting to order at 6 p.m. on December the 11th. Council members present are CO Del Orco, Gearbaugh, Rice, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, Mayor Marl, and Council Member Elect Lesh. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Treasurer Cole, and Parks and Rec Director Lambert. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments. Moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by CO to approve the agenda as submitted. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Clerk Royal, have we heard from Councilmember Kamara Sulak?
I have not.
No? Okay. Then let's hold off and we can excuse his absence at the end if he's unable to attend this evening. We come now to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any person may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested, but of course not required, to state his or her name and address for the record. The record will reflect there are no citizens present this evening. Clerk Royal, did we receive any written comments in advance of tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their remarks read at this time? Okay. Easy enough. Then we proceed to the one and only discussion item, which is a continuation of our dialogue on the rec center's feasibility study and financial considerations. You do have a couple supplemental materials in front of you. Is this all the same document?
Yes.
City Manager O'Toole? Okay. And it's 4 pages front and back. So obviously this is a work meeting. We're not going to take any formal action this evening. And some issues involving the rec center will certainly be considered by the 2024 City Council, but we want to provide an opportunity once again to address any outstanding questions, concerns you have, and hear a follow-up presentation from staff. So unless there's any direct questions for me, City Manager O'Toole, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So this really is intended as a follow-up to the outstanding questions remaining from our November 20th City Council work session. We know there wasn't really enough time to have a full dialogue following the information that was shared then. So we'll recap very, very quickly and then answer what outstanding questions there were from that session, as well as open it up for additional questions. One thing I do want to point out is we're looking to set a more conversational tone tonight. There's no specific ask or action item needed from council at this time. Staff has already gotten the direction we needed from that November 20th meeting. We're continuing down that path to explore opportunities for other partnerships, other funding sources, and I think ultimately what we will be able to present sometime in the future is a plan that has a combination of the previously mentioned different capital stack opportunities for the city. So again, if we missed anything in this presentation, we'll have a chance to answer it, but at this time, I'm not expecting there'll be any immediate need for action or immediate follow-up after this. So just quickly recapping what we're talking about, again, mostly focused in on that phase 1 opportunity, the $6.8 to $7.3 million improvement to the aquatic center, looking at different capital stack options. We touched briefly at the last session on what debt financing would look like, what grant and fundraising opportunities might look like, potential for partnerships, and then some scenarios for millages. And Treasurer Cole will do a deep dive more specifically on partnerships and millages.
Go ahead, Clerk Royal.
I got a notice that they can't hear you on the live stream, so you may want to speak closer into the mic. Okay.
Yep, the microphones are on. Just make sure the microphone is pulled close to you when you're given the floor to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully everyone can hear me out there on the live feed. So we're going to talk a little bit about the partnerships that we really want to create and have. And you can kind of see that one leads into the other, and they both kind of complement each other. So the first would be formal partnerships. So that would be, an authority. It would be, could be with one or multiple communities or units. This takes a school or a municipality to become just one more an authority with. So that would be a great option for us. A joint venture, we talked about that, whether it's private or public, with the township, with the county, private health care. We're exploring all of those. Hosting a nonprofit, so teen center or senior services that would be available within the recreation center. We talked a little bit about the county and our partnership with them. We have a AAA bond rating, so there would be a lot of discussions that we would need to have, but we could ask them to, in a sense, borrow their bond rating for this project as well. That would just give us a little bit lower rate and make the payments more affordable. And then we can also set up annual service agreements. So this is just like a contribution model. A little bit kind of like, if you can imagine the way that SAFB does it currently. It would be going to, developing a, sorry. It would be developing a plan in place where we could say whatever method that we want to test and use that we could get other communities to agree upon, and it would just be a contribution amount, much like we have with SAFB. And that kind of leads to more of what I want to talk about with our informal partnerships. You are all, in that genre of an informal partnership with us. We want to have elected officials from everyone here sitting in this room, to the state, to federally, to know about this project. We think that it's a very appealing and alluring project that will draw a lot of attention. And the more of these these partnerships that we can create, so much like we are going to eventually have a capital stack, we're hoping to have that same stack of a diversity of partners. And that will really bode well for us to be attractive for grant dollars and direct appropriations. And you can see on the slide here some examples of the direct appropriations that have been given for recreation centers across the country. And here locally, there really seems to be a profound movement for recreation all across the country. I really do believe that we need to especially have a strong standing here in Washtenaw County, so that not only are they aware, but they're ambassadors for the project as well, so they can speak to and know about, and hopefully, make this a possibility to be a destination for Washtenaw County. So there are many different ways we can fund the rec center projects and the rec center itself. One of the considerations is a millage. So we talked a little bit about some of the improvement projects. First, I want to assure you that just like all of our other millages, they will be used for a specific purpose, audited and monitored regularly. The millage would be for not just the recreation center, but for the parks and some projects that have been delayed for a number of years that really need to happen for our park system as well. Certainly, creating an authority regionally is an attractive idea. That would increase our tax base. It also increases our voter base. So we would need approval from both communities or districts for any ballot items. Here you can see our upcoming deadlines, which is May 14th for the August election and August 13th for the November election. Time is really tight. So we're going to work as hard as we can to get everything together as we present options to all of you. Last thing that I want to talk about is, the balancing act. I was able to take some time and really look at other local units with some similar qualities as our recreation center and delve into how they fund them. Overall, using the research that we did, we couldn't find one example of a recreation center that was more than 75% funded by operations, by program revenue. So right now, as far as being self-funded, I feel like we have enjoyed the luxury of being self-funded for many, many years. However, it's very impressive, but it's essential to recognize that operational dollars aren't enough to cover projects and improvements. So in order to ensure the continued success and the enhancement of our recreation, we need to look at some other models. The last thing I'd like to turn to is, before I hand it off to Park Director Lambert, is the support breakdown that was offered in your supplemental package.
Which page are you referring to, Treasurer Cole? I don't have that document.
You can, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, let's just pause for a minute while Colleen comes back with us.
I was going to say, I might have it.
I won't speak to the slide too much until City Manager O'Toole is back with copies for all of you to reference. I'll let you know a little bit of the process that I undertook. So I said, how can I get the most recent financial information? What are these communities projecting? Just because of last year, they had a certain set of financial consideration. What are they projecting it's going to look like for this next year? So in order to obtain those numbers, I had to research their budgets and go through and kind of get a picture together of what each specific recreation center looked like. How did they fund it? Where were they getting the money? Was it coming from operations? Was it coming from the general fund? Do they have a millage? So I was able to put this together, and you can see that 1, 2, 3 of the communities do have a millage. That would be Macomb, Farmington, and Washtenaw. And the other communities have a combination. So when you look at the rec center, they're funded all different types of ways. I can say that the city of Saline is extremely strong still, with now looking at our budget, 72% funded by program fees. It's the highest out of any community that we've looked at. Additionally, if you look at some of these other models, you can see all of the different items that we're suggesting are being deployed by one of these local units. So no matter which path we go, we have some good resources to look at and reach out to. Next, I'd like to hand it over to Director Lambert.
Thank you, Treasurer Cole. Appreciate that. So I wanted to dive into a little bit more about our current usage of the rec center, because I know there were some questions just regarding membership and how our members utilize the space. Last meeting, I spoke about our visitor numbers, and we have annually over 150,000 visits to the rec center. This slide kind of provides a bit of a breakdown on those numbers, just so you can kind of see where people are using our services. We can track class participation, we can track registrations, but one thing we're not able to track is our just general use of the facility. So once members come through, if they're going to use the gymnasium, the fitness rooms, the aquatics spaces, if they're just going to use those on their free time, we don't have a way to track them. So I did speak with our staff and with our observations. We do see a lot of cross usage. So a lot of people will come, especially with families, and the family membership is our strongest package that we have. So we see them taking advantage of a lot of the different amenities that we have. And I did want to provide you with just some stats about that. With the family package, that's 24% of our membership packages. But when we look at individual members, it's almost half of our membership. 48% of those who have a membership are part of a family package. Just to give you kind of an idea of how our users use the facility. So we'll go with the next slide. So we talked a bit about the aquatic center, and that was a question of should the aquatic center be separated out, a separate membership. I reached out to, we have a facilities group, so facility directors throughout mostly the Metro Detroit area. And out of the 7 communities that followed up with me, and these are rec centers, municipally owned, that have fitness, gymnasiums, and aquatics, all 7 do have that as a included amenity as part of the membership. So I was curious if there was anybody who did not, and I have not come across anybody in our area of the state. A couple things also to note, that with the Barry Dunn feasibility study, they included a thorough needs assessment analysis using focus groups, surveys, and engagement stations. And that information concluded that, number one, the aquatics center is the most valued part of the membership. And then there was another question in those surveys related to where do customers see the most need for improvement, and aquatics rose to the top. So again, kind of reiterating, the information from that feasibility study to, further show the need to address our aquatic center. And then the next slide. So then we took another dive, just looking at our service area. And as you can see on this map, if you can look at, where I-94 is, there's lots of dots north of that. It shows that there's opportunities in our service area, but more to the north end, not so much south of 94. And really looking at the information from Barry Dunn, so that's that kind of that graph on the left. Public year-round aquatic centers, only one on that list is really comparable to what we have, and that'd be Mary Lou. None of those aquatic centers have like splash features or like a true family pool, which further reiterates the idea that this could be a destination if we, move forward with this project. Yeah, I think that was, yep.
So the last slide here, we just want to cover, there were a few things that just due to timing and turnaround of like third-party assessments, we could not produce. So open questions that we still owe answers to. The cost of a demolition and new build, we have a third-party engineering firm looking at that for us, as well as a second opinion on the phase 1 cost and estimated engineering and construction services costs. So those will all come in a future communication. One other thing we're working on actively is benchmarking events that are converting to members. That's a new process, the post-event sign-up coupon that we'll be tracking. One thing I will note is we do have early numbers from our December promotion, and we added, through that process, 33 new memberships, or about 50 individual members. So you'll notice one of the sheets we shared tonight looked at different scenarios, and obviously we could go down a deep rabbit hole of all the different scenarios that we could come up with of how this could be structured, but we put some high-level ones on there, and adding 50 new members in a 2-week period is pretty substantial. And then obviously, currently in progress is the prior next steps that we discussed at our last meeting. So, any questions?
Very good. All right, let's start to my immediate right, and then I'll work my way around the table to council members Rice, Delorco, jump to Gearbaum, and I'll go at the very end. We have ample time for questions. I plan to try to get it around here by 8 o'clock at the very latest. So we'll start with a round of 5 minutes, and I'm sure we'll have opportunity for a second, third round if desired. So, council member-elect Lash, any questions for the city manager, city treasurer, or Parks Director?
Thank you. That was a very good presentation. My one question I have, which kind of piggybacks on a public comment that came up at the last city council meeting. One of the lifeguards from the aquatic center currently had come up and noted that the surface of the aquatics area has deteriorated to the point. Is that something that would be able to be taken care of prior to, I mean, we want to get everything rolling quickly, but, as far as safety features within the rec center, is that something that would come out of general budget or would potentially be somewhere else?
That's quite an expensive project. So early quotes, and this goes back several years ago, I mean, it's upwards to $1 million if you were to replace that pool deck. So we would have to be seeking, funding for that type of project, yeah. So,
and one of the challenges here is obviously the layout of the pool deck changes substantially if we move forward with this project. So we do have to, in the near future, make a decision. If we're moving forward with the project, then obviously the investment in the pool deck comes at that time, as opposed to investing $1 million now and then tearing out part of that pool deck 18 months from now.
Yeah, and I was going to say, plus that type of project, we'll have to shut down the pool for several months from start to finish. I think Canton, they're getting ready to reopen their aquatic center, and it's been shut down for several months, to retile and do the flooring, just like we need to do. So yes. So I think it's something we want to be really strategic about as we look at, which direction are we going to go. This does have to be addressed.
All right, well, thank you. That's all I had.
Very good. Councilmember Rice, questions for city manager, city treasurer, or Parks and Rec director? You have 5 minutes.
Yes, thanks. I'll start off with a discussion, I'd like to know a little bit more about, if we went through with this regional authority, which communities are we targeting, and is Pittsfield probably not one of them, since they have their own Parks and Rec department, but are they going to have any sort of a problem with this, considering this was a piece of land that they gave to us?
So I would temper expectations on authority because we don't have an existing relationship with any townships. I think the more likely path forward would be some sort of joint venture or joint partnership or service agreement with a surrounding township to establish that relationship, and an authority may be something that then presents itself after 2 or 3 years of successful cooperative relationships. That's just my sense of things based on preliminary conversations we've had. But certainly I think any surrounding township that's touched by our existing service area would be a potential partner in that future venture, or again, more likely a joint partnership.
Okay. So when we talk about that, and we talk about potentially doing a millage, we discussed this a bit in the Parks Commission meeting a couple of weeks ago. How do we move forward with a millage in such a way that we can make sure that these additional parks projects are also included in it? And if we were to do that, I see the timelines for these things. Would we have enough time to really get some good information on, we have some estimates on what some of these projects would cost, some real good substantial information on how we move forward with those, so that we can talk to the community about the benefits of such a millage, and it not just being for those who use the rec center, but for those who use all of the parks and rec services throughout Saline.
Absolutely. I think if it became apparent that that was a direction council was interested in us pursuing further, my next step recommendation would be to bring in an engineering consultant to do formal opinions of cost on these project scopes. We already have a very nice path forward in terms of the 5-year parks plan between that document, what we've established in our soon-to-be adopted master plan, and the collective knowledge of staff. I think the missing piece here is just really the dollars and then a construction timeline associated with that.
Yep, perfect. And I started to write another question, but I got distracted, so I'll come back to it.
Very good. Councilmember Delorco, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. First off, I just want to thank Treasurer Cole for putting together this slide for me, and I do apologize for not getting my questions out sooner. I was reminded of it when the packet came out. I meant to ask those questions sooner, but I recognize that this was a lot of work and took you a lot of time to do this. So, I think it's very clear that Saline has the biggest burden in terms of subsidizing the majority of its cost through the program fees, through the memberships. And I don't think that's sustainable long term. I think, like was mentioned previously, we need to move in the direction of placing less of the burden on membership fees to subsidize the operations and maintenance of the facility, and find additional sources of revenue to support that in any way that comes. And I support grants, I support partnerships, and I also support the millage. But I also made it clear that I didn't think it was equitable to have a millage that placed the burden square on the shoulders of Saline proper residents and didn't incorporate the folks living in the surrounding townships that also benefit from using the rec center. And the fact that our tax dollars are subsidizing those activities for everyone else, and they're not paying their fair share. So the question that I have hinges on how do we create a regional millage for the surrounding townships and the city of Saline, insofar as that it's a district-wide or a regional. What partnerships do we need to forge in order to make that legal, I guess is the question I have.
So the only legal path forward to creating a singular millage would be an authority. Now, that being said, there are other models out there for intergovernmental agreements. One is our existing fire authority. where the individual units simply have a contribution amount that they make to the authority in a given year, and how they go about collecting that either through a millage or through general fund appropriations of their own is really theirs to decide on an individual level. Again, I think that's the lowest barrier to entry to start building those relationships, and we could build those one-off. You could add one township in, see how that relation plays out, add the next in, or really come in all together. It also means that there's less legal structure, so the startup to something like that is very short-term. I mean, really as fast as any given partners want to move at one time. But the only way to do a regional millage would be an authority.
And I suspect it would take longer to create that type of authority before the deadlines of May 14th and August 13th.
Yes.
So, given the concerns that Councilmember-elect Letch raised with the unsafe conditions of the pool deck, what is it that we have in mind as far as a realistic timeline to get some solution in place for moving forward or not moving forward with the proposed renovations to the rec center? Are we looking to do this in the next year, or are we looking to slow down, see if we can forge these relationships and establish a regional millage? Or maybe there's support, aside from myself, to move forward with a city proper millage. I do not support that, but my vote doesn't matter because I will no longer be a council member in another few weeks, so.
Well, you'll still be a voter, and we always, we're always happy.
Member of the
Yeah.
electorate who would vote to
Yeah.
approve or
Understood, yeah. But that's one in very many, so.
So my anticipated timeline for this, and my colleagues can feel free to correct me if they feel like I'm being too aggressive or not aggressive enough, just what I've seen in terms of capital project rollout, this upcoming construction season would be far too aggressive. So we would not necessarily need to be going after any sort of millage by that August deadline. In all likelihood, I think the November election is a fair one to target, simply because it is our largest, our most popular election in terms of who we can draw from. And so you get a real pulse of the community in terms of what would be supported.
Especially
And
this year.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And to accomplish that, I think what we need to have in place before then is a solid idea of at least 1 to 2 potential partnerships in the venture, a solid opinion of cost, and then likely design engineering completed, so that we had bid documents at the ready if that millage passed.
So the 1 to 2 partnerships that you speak of is enough to establish the partnerships
Yes.
we need to go for a regional authority?
Yes, and I do anticipate, again, as Treasurer Cole mentioned, just preliminary conversations. There's also very good chance that we will get some traction with grant dollars or appropriations, particularly if we can pitch this as a true regional partnership.
And if we did that, we wouldn't have to ask for as many mills, and it would.
Correct.
Yeah.
Really, the idea is, still, if we can target that 1 mill, it's more than just the rec center project.
Right,
It is
or parks in
Yes.
general.
So it's the city's contribution to that debt service just becomes part of the millage. The other part of it is the debt service or the annual dollars that go to other improvements.
It's okay, okay, okay.
appreciate the attitude you brought forward. Mr. CO, you have 5 minutes for questions or comments if you like.
Thank you. The question, and I don't know who knows the answer to this, maybe you do. Treasurer Cole. The 0.7 of a mil for Washington County Recreation, it supports the Mary Lou Murray Center solely. Is there any sharing of those rec funds?
It supports their parks and more than just the Mary Lou Center.
Okay, but is there any opportunity for us to see if we could tap into a portion of that, even a fractional amount, as opposed to forming some kind of our own authority?
Councilperson CEO, that's exactly one of the ideas that we had. We would be approaching the county for not just, different items with bonding or potential help in that way, but also anything that they were willing to contribute towards the project, either a one-time gift, or, sorry, not a gift, but a one-time contribution, or annually.
And really, we're just starting to get this issue on their radar. Very preliminary, but I'm pleased to share that at the county board meeting last week, they did approve a $25,000 appropriation for a subsidized senior recreation program. So we'll be rolling out a program in the upcoming calendar year that's partially subsidized by Washtenaw County to reduce the rate for low-income seniors in our service area.
Okay. I guess, you know, the talk of an authority sounds like an attractive idea on its surface, but in practicality, I mean, you form a fire authority, there's an obvious need to have the fire department service your area. There's not an obvious need for some of these people who've not ever participated in supporting a rec center other than memberships to support a millage, because, you know, I can see a large percentage of folks saying, well, if I choose to recreate, I can go any number of places, and not necessarily just to Saline. Why would I want to dedicate a mill, or have a dedicated millage imposed on me as part of a partnership? So how do we go about trying to coerce, or coerce isn't the right word, but convince people that that's a good thing to do?
Well, again, I don't think any of my colleagues up here would say that it makes sense for us to go after a millage that's solely for the rec center. Saline is unique, as you can see from other communities, in not having some sort of parks and recreation millage or other dedicated funding source outside of general fund dollars for its parks and recreation services. And I think that's evidence from really a history of well-wishing in terms of our capital improvement planning, rather than being able to tangibly execute projects that we know are in high demand in the community. I mean, other communities are outpacing us, not just in terms of their recreational amenities, but trail systems, non-motorized pathways, improvements to play structures, accessible play structures. These are all things that I think a community of our size, of our demographic, really needs to be able to deliver on.
I agree, but again, I mean, my association in public service with the Saline community started with what was then the Parks and Beautification Commission many, many years ago. And even then we talked about how do we get people to pay their fair share for using facilities like Curtis Park, which is right on Michigan Avenue and is on sort of the western boundary of the town. A lot of people use that, I'm sure, who have no skin in the game as far as supporting what goes into that, amenity. So I don't know what we do to, I mean, I guess, although it sounds like a good idea, I'm going to need some further convincing to.
Certainly, and again, I mean, I think the millage idea is something, staff can't run with that on our own, so we would need council consensus if that was either an avenue we wanted to continue down, at which point we would do a more comprehensive assessment of exactly what projects could be accomplished, the level of debt service associated with it, and the overall impact on the community as a result.
That's my only concern. I think we do need some additional form of support for the rec center. I think that we need to upgrade the rec center. So I agree with that whole idea to make it a more attractive amenity. But I'm just kind of stymied about how do we get the bucks. So I'm listening.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Steele. That's
Can-
5 minutes. Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, you have 5 minutes.
So I think my questions might be sort of all over the place. Just quickly, I know I've mentioned this before, and I just want to understand that when we're comparing, you know, aquatic facilities and things like that, are we also looking at private clubs and hotels and just other amenities, like places that have those kind of amenities?
So,
Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, so we
Go back.
did dive into some maybe non-public spaces, looking for pools that have those types of amenities. And in our service region, there were two. There's the Hilton Garden Inn, which is over by Briarwood Mall, and it has a very tiny little, tot spray area. And then down in Dundee, there's Splash Universe, but they've been shut down since 2020. And there's not a date yet for the reopening of their water park. It's just the hotel is still open. Those are about the only two that we came across that really offer the types of amenities that we're looking to put into our aquatic center.
And I mean, places like Travis Point or Liberty Athletic or any of those types of places too.
Right, so Travis Point has an indoor pool, when we're looking at indoor pool spaces, but it's just a single pool. They don't have any special features within that pool area. So we were kind of seeking out,
Comparable.
yeah, comparable
aquatics.
indoor pools that have, the features such as a splash area for the younger ones, a lazy river slides, a destination type pool.
Right. Well, and I think it's going to be very difficult to find something that's going to fit into that particular mold. I mean, it's sort of like, if you want a little splash pad, well, Mylan has a little splash pad outside. So, I mean, I think there are different pieces that are,
Yeah.
I understand we're looking at the whole big package, but not necessarily that's that, I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
we're looking at everything.
So what we're finding is similar packages, but you have to kind of go outside of the county. So once you get to Canton, to the Summit, they have those types of features. Farmington Hills at their new facility, which is called the Hawk, they have those features, So once you kind of get into the Metro Detroit area, you're finding those aquatic centers, especially municipally owned ones that have the features that we're talking about, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Then moving on, so when we talk about the December update with 33 new memberships and 50 members, so could that be parent-child or are those, so I mean, can you really count them as separate? Because, I mean, a child's going to be coming with its parent. I mean, it's sort of a tag-along.
So the reason that we distinguish between memberships and members is precisely because in the scenarios we presented, we break down a per member cost. It's agnostic then to the type of membership that is purchased. This really was the easiest way for us to express in a dollar per person impact just what membership means to us. And really the question that was presented was how many memberships do we need to bridge this gap? Memberships is not a great way to frame it because you could have different types of memberships. So members is an easier per unit, measurable.
Okay.
So in looking at, just to give you an idea, for our memberships, as of today, we have 1,325 membership packages, but the actual members are just shy of 3,000. So we're approaching that 3,000 member mark.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Now, what I'm trying to understand is when we talk about if this were to proceed as you're planning and you start construction, I believe at one point we talked about the pool would have to be closed for 18 months. So how are we going to make up that lost membership time? I mean, what are we going to do to subsidize for that?
So in the past, when we've shut down the pool, we've created partnerships with other, local pools. For example, the YMCA right now, they are in a 2-month shutdown of their pool, and they have a partnership with Mary Lou Murray as well as Mac Pool, so that their members can go swim at those other facilities. Canton recently did the same thing. They partnered up with Mary Lou Murray and then a couple other pools, in the other direction. So in 2006, when we shut down the entire facility for several months for the renovations, we actually moved like fitness classes over to Liberty School. We got really creative. We worked with Travis Point to get some of our swimmers over there and just other facilities. So that's what we would be looking at, is creating those partnerships.
And we did anticipate some revenue loss, though some operating cost reduction as well, not equal to the revenue loss. We were more conservative on the revenue loss side in that $6.8 to $7.3 million figure.
Hang tight, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, because we're over the 5-minute mark.
Okay.
We will come back. Councilmember Gearby, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. This last week, and I'd asked for additional information, basically some data sets and stuff from City Manager O'Toole. So I've been looking at not only the memberships, but also, I've been looking at not only the memberships, but also some of the data that, City Treasurer Cole has presented, and I'd like to distribute this around. This is looking at the dashboard information that's provided by the state of Michigan, and it gives an idea of what, the 7 comparable entities that we're looking at, in terms of what they have as a general fund, what they spend for their rec department, and so forth. And what I thought would be helpful with this is to kind of get an idea of, when you look at the perspective from the scale of what we contribute versus what some of the other townships and things do, you can kind of see. And as you look at the categories, I can go across with this, unfortunately I don't have it for display, generally tells you how much their general fund is, how much they're spending on a recreation. So in cases, you'll see like Macomb Township spends $3.15 million on recreation, where the city of Farmington Hills spends $12 million, or even the Township of Canton spends $13 million. But then when you start getting into where their sources come from, it gets very interesting. So like in our case, we're spending .321, this is 2022 information, $321,000 on rec support that's coming from the general fund. And then we identify these other sources, which may be enterprise funds and some of that. But then I want to go across this because I'm looking at the scales. So you have square miles, population, property taxes. And for me, and I think this is the question that we need to answer, if you look at the millages, you'll see we're higher than any of these comparables in terms of what we're expecting our citizens to bear. So we're at 67.53 mils if you don't have an exemption on your home, where other ones are around 50. So there's a significant impact in terms of the overall millage that we're expecting to pay just within the city when you start comparing ourselves to a Pittsfield or to a Macomb Township. You know, when you look at Pittsfield at the very bottom line, they only put $1.4 million into their rec. If we put more money into our rec than they do, yet they have a population of 39,000 people. So when we start looking at some of these, I think these are the arguments we use for our regional planning and support, that we need to have support from Pittsfield, like the idea of a joint venture or so forth, because they're expecting what appears to be a lot more rec activities coming out of us around the city of Ann Arbor or somewhere. So I want to share this with all of you because I think that's the thing the key thing to look at is we're not Farmington Hills. We're the city of Saline, 4.4 square miles, compared to a former township. And their tax bases are significantly larger. And what we can absorb as a city in order to continue getting residents to come into it, a millage is going to be a significant impact. Even when we were talking about another millage for roads the other day, I don't know how we can do that when we're already at a maximum that I think is bearable by the people that live in this community. As for other questions, some of the things, and I've been talking to people that have been former members of the rec, they still have the consideration of, which has been mentioned before, about cleanliness, their expectations when they go into the rec facility. And I need to know how we can improve upon that to make that a priority if we're going to be out marketing and selling our rec facility. And these are long-term members that have switched either going to Planet Fitness or going somewhere else. So that's another question I want to understand, how we will move forward if we don't have funding to continue to maintain a high-level standard that people would expect. And then one of the things is, what is our end game? Is it to maintain this rec facility as a #1 facility for this community? And if we can't achieve it through these villages and whatever else, as I look at these numbers, what will happen in 3 years? I mean, I'm looking at this, luckily, we're going to have some debt servicing and things dropping off that eventually would allow it to continue. But that money's going to have to continue to be reinvested into the rec facility in terms of solving debt service and so forth. So I'll let you answer one or two of those.
Sure. Well, I'll chime in real quick. I just want, as a point of clarification, Pittsfield Township doesn't have its own rec center. They do have a recreation department. So there's a little bit of a difference. These other facilities do have tangible facilities.
They do have a rec center, ours.
Yeah, that's true.
Our rec
That's
center
true.
don't
Yes.
provide money.
Yes.
What I'm saying.
Fair point.
Touche.
Yeah.
They should, therefore, they should help pay for
To the question of what happens in 3 years if we do nothing. So in 2020, in FY25, we will have about $108,000 in debt service dropping off. At that point, if all we needed to do was maintain the status quo or possibly some small debt issue, let's say we did go out for the $1 million or $1.5 million to redo the pool deck and that was it, you could basically swap the debt service in that situation, and we wouldn't be in much different of a situation, but we certainly wouldn't be attracting new membership with that kind of move. We'd just be looking to maintain the status quo. perfectly acceptable path forward if that's what we want to do. But the general direction to staff has been, we need to find a way to make this facility even more self-sustaining than it is. And in order to do that, we need to be regionally attractive. And the plan that we have here and the opportunity to go forward with partnerships, we believe is what makes us more regionally attractive.
And if we can't get, my concern is getting the partnership. I'm not sure we're going to get buy-in from the other townships. I feel Pittsfield, though, would be a significant attempt to try and get some kind of organization venture with them. So whatever you do on that, I hope we can do that. I do appreciate what you provided with the 3 scenarios. At least gives us kind of an idea what's going forward. What I'm concerned is, and I want to make sure that this year, we basically tapped what we believe is going to be the support from the recreation, from the general fund. That it's not going to be significant like it was last year with a totally unknown number that ended up being significantly higher than anything we anticipated.
Every indication is, and feel free to chime in, Treasurer Cole, but every indication is we are on target at this point. I don't know if you want to keep looking up any figures or if you feel comfortable.
No, I will confirm that the numbers are looking like we are right on track, even a little bit more on track than I thought that we were going to. I know, I'm not promising anything, but comparative to where we were last year, things look sound, and I don't think we're going to be far off from the budget projections.
And one other thing, do we still maintain any kind of policies that provide free memberships to former city officials?
To former city officials?
Yes.
So the mayor has always received a lifetime membership. Is that what you're asking?
Former mayors, yes.
Yes, former mayors, yes. And then,
Mayors since the facility was
yes. And then the only other,
Yeah, was that ever authorized by city council?
that was before my time.
I mean, if we're looking at struggling with money, I have a concern with providing free memberships for a lifetime benefit, which also may have IRS implications.
There will
which have
be
not
a,
been reported.
there will be a little bit of delay to turn around, but I'm sure when Clerk Royal returns to the office after her absence this week, we can look and see if there's any historical action by council.
Perfect.
And certainly if there hasn't been historical action, bring it back for a formal council decision on how that type of program would work.
And then also, I would like, yeah, I just want to say, I also have an IRS ruling on that too. Thank you.
Thank you all for the presentation. Let me start with these 2 sheets. One that was provided just now by Mr. Gearbaugh and the one.
Put the mic in front of you.
Let me start with these 2 sheets, the one that was provided by Councilmember Gearbaugh and then the one that was copied and distributed by the city manager about 10, 15 minutes ago. These are interesting comparables. However, the communities that we're contrasting ourselves with, at least to me, it's not apples and oranges. When you look at, and I'll assume these figures are correct, I have no reason to believe they're not, but if you look at Mr. Gearbaugh's spreadsheet, it talks about both square miles and population. We're a city of, we're a city of.
That's right off of our information, 4.41
No,
square miles.
I'm talking more about population. I think we're a little higher than that.
91 people.
So, I mean, we're roughly 10,000, and we're comparing ourselves to communities of 92, 82, 366, 98, 97, and 93, and geographically substantially larger. So I guess the point would be, one, you can comment on that, and then 2, is there value in trying to compare Saline and the recreational amenities that we provide with communities with comparable populations, tax bases, and geographic size. So Tecumseh,
Mason.
Brighton, Mason, Plymouth, Northville, et cetera.
So I think there's a dichotomy here. There's one, comparing our facility to like facilities, which is what this does. And then there's comparing us to like communities, and then assessing our recreational amenities to what's offered in those communities, which I think we'd be happy to produce that document as well.
Yeah, at least from my perspective, that data would be valuable. Not that, I mean, this is helpful and it's interesting, but comparables to communities that are comparable in size and demographics would be, I think, more applicable, at least for me. I do want to state for the record, I have had conversations with two of my counterparts, the supervisor of Lodi Township and the supervisor of York Township. I did provide them both copies of the letter that we sent to our federal officials, our state officials, and our county officials requesting supplemental funding for our wastewater treatment plant, for the rec center, Parks and Recs more broadly, and then the downtown and accessibility within our downtown. And I did receive at least verbal commitments from both that if we start to get traction on a direct appropriation or grants, they would be happy to write letters of support. So again, there's much more that needs to be done to nurture those relationships, and I'm fully supportive of continuing to engage with them, Saline Township, Pittsfield Township, the schools and counties, because I think the only way to make this work is to have partnerships with not only our neighbors, but also larger governmental jurisdictions. Can you go back a couple slides? I think one of my questions was addressed. So for a 6-year period, yeah, right there. So for a 6-year period, our average general fund contributions specifically to the rec center on average was 2.6%.
Correct.
And that's from 2017 to 2023. Okay. That's helpful. I think you want to go a few slides forward. Yeah, actually just that one. Yeah. So I think it was Mr. Seo who made reference to this, and then also Councilmember Rice. I think I understand the desire to have something on the November 2024 ballot, just because there's a large portion of our electorate that participates or will participate in a presidential election. My own opinion is that's probably a bit ambitious. I think Councilmember Rice made some really good points, which is if there is going to be a package presented to the voters, I think that's a big hit. It obviously needs to be much broader than the rec center. And I don't know that in the next 3 to 6 months we will have data in terms of specific, tangible park improvements that we can guarantee to the electorate to help sell a millage. Now, as Councilmember Rice reported at the last meeting, last regular council meeting, there was an initial discussion about some improvements at Mill Pond, and I think those discussions will continue, but it's going to take some time to refine what that vision is and what the cost is. Those discussions need to continue, but I'd also like to see them broaden beyond Mill Pond Park to consider what other improvements a potential village or authority or regional partnership could support at some of our other municipal parks. Please.
Mayor, I would like to add that we do our annual CIP process where we go through all of our project needs. We work with our department heads. We walk through facilities. They do sometimes feasibility studies and do an assessment. And so we have a full list of what needs to be accomplished in the near future for the rec center for the next 6 years. We continually refine that and make changes as needs arise. I do feel like we are in a very good position to have projects that are turnkey. Additionally, with the funding model, there would need to be decisions made on which projects take priority. Not all of these would be able to be accomplished on the onset.
Right, certainly.
Yes, and one thing I'll add to that again is there is a big missing component to this, and that is that outside third-party engineering assessment of cost and construction timelines that would need to be accomplished before August 13th if any sort of ballot language were to come through. A quick note, in her infinite wisdom, Clerk Royal did find for us in 1990 a motion that was passed to grant lifetime family membership to all mayors and former mayors of the city of Saline.
Pulled that out of her hat.
I know, right?
That's all I have for the moment. We'll do another round of questions. Excuse me, Councilmember-elect Lesh, do you have any additional questions or comments?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Rice?
Is this guy working now, Ben? Yeah, we can hear me. Okay, so one main question that I have as a council person is what do we need to do to get this stuff in front of the county more, to get this stuff in front of, to get applications for grants in? Like what can we do in the interim to start building some momentum while you all are also investigating these types of things?
So that's exactly what staff is working on right now. We are building those relationships. The step one in the process is making everyone aware of the challenges and the projects that we have lined up and our goals. So really streamlining the pitch that you've seen across now 3 meetings into one succinct presentation for our potential partners and supporters. And we've already started having some of those early conversations, but in terms of what council can do to help us in that, when we're talking to other electeds or we're having conversations with your counterparts in different communities, make sure they're aware of this opportunity, that they know that this is a project that we're looking to bring to fruition, and we need kind of all hands on deck to help us get there.
One of the things that I think I would like to see over the next, because I completely agree, I don't want to rush into a millage for this. But I do understand the urgency to want to make some of these improvements. I mean, it's like a double-edged sword, right? Like, if we don't improve things, it's going to continue to go downhill and blah, blah, blah. But one of the things that I think, in the meantime, I don't want us to stop doing is looking for that money that's out there, right? So I could see this scenario where you all are working on putting us in a space where, should we decide in August, yes, let's get this on the ballot, or should we decide come next April or whenever there's going to be another election, let's get this on the ballot. But in the meantime, sending out those other little things that we can be doing to secure recreational funding, things like that. So I'd like to see us continue to move forward. I don't want to put a complete halt on the absolute no of a millage, but I would much rather say no to a millage later because we've done a lot of other things to get money before that, if that makes sense. So that's really all I have.
Yes, and so I do, completely agree and support Colleen's kind of communication that first is awareness. Just talking about the project right now is the single most important thing. The issue with looking for grants right now is we don't have a succinct plan. So we're going to be poised in the best position once we have that plan in place. If we have cross-community partnership, if we're hosting a senior center, if we have a nonprofit come in that wants to host a teen center there, all of these things bode very, very well for grant dollars and direct appropriations. So and the other part of this is timing, right? We don't want to receive a grant for the pool of the deck that's only good for 2 years when we don't know if we're going to get it in time. So I think, kind of taking a step back and just really talking about this project to everyone that you come into contact with is the most important thing right now. And we are working very diligently to get together a succinct plan. All these things do take time. And we are striving to make it such that we don't have to kind of go down that road of a millage.
Sure. I appreciate that.
Adding to that, and those are great points, there are certain programs that we cannot go after for funding until we have a formal engineering opinion of cost and a preliminary design document. So there are certain boxes we will need to check in order to help ourselves out in scoring the points that we need to really identify additional funding sources. But I don't want anyone to feel like we're going to rest on our laurels if you guys say that we're going after a millage. We're not going to, wipe our hands and say, all right, we're all good here. We would want to get that portion of the debt service as low as humanly possible.
That's it, Councilmember Rice? Yep. Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Del Orco, any additional questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you. Just in having participated in this conversation this evening, I feel like a take-home message for me is the way to market the buy-in from the other areas, surrounding townships, county, is not to make this a discussion about the rec center, but a discussion about parks and how we enhance the recreation of the community as a whole by enhancing not just the rec center, but the parks, all of the parks as an amalgam. So that brings up the question about the county's commitment, the county's buy-in on this. Maybe I'm wrong about my perception on that, but it feels like Washtenaw County is very generous to Chelsea, Dexter, a lot of the surrounding townships. And Saline's always at the end of the line, at the back of the bus, as far as appropriations, direct appropriations from the county to help subsidize some of these efforts. Is there someone from this community of influence and persuasion that is in the Parks Commissioner ear at the county level that can make inroads in that regard?
Unfortunately, no, it does not appear to be direct representation on the county parks board. One thing I will say is I think this comes down to all of us at this table also doing everything we can to get in front of county decision makers.
I think that's a very important point. If we can make some kind of galvanized effort to get in front of, I mean, reaching out to Shannon Beeman may be one little piece of that equation, but I think there's a broad effort to get in front of the county and have them help us with, you mentioned 1 or 2 partnerships to get this regionalization in place. That to me seems like an obvious one. But I don't know, maybe you guys have other people in mind or organizations in mind that you feel is lower hanging fruit, that's more easy to go after ahead of, because it's been a long-standing problem with Washtenaw County, I think.
Well, to your point, at our last presentation, we showed a slide from Washtenaw County's own master planning and parks survey efforts. They've identified the need for indoor aquatic centers as one of the biggest recreational gaps in the entire county.
Understood.
We have a solution. They
Right.
need to be aware that the solution is present if they're willing to help invest in it.
I couldn't agree with that statement more, yeah. I guess I have nothing further.
Very good, appreciate that. Councilmember Sue, you have an additional 5 minutes if you'd like it.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know where to go from here. I guess the question I have is, I've seen 2 or 3 different concepts of the pool renovation. One looks like it has only a smaller lap pool of maybe 2 or 3 lanes. Another one keeps the existing pool and then creates something in the space of the present shallow pool that we have. When do we begin to make a decision about what this would look like? When do we make a decision about, are we going to have an outdoor splash pad? When do we make decisions like where are we going with this?
Sure. So those next steps that I talked about, among them is getting a second opinion of costs, so making sure that our cost estimates for what was presented in the feasibility study are accurate, and also getting estimates on design and construction engineering. The design engineering portion would be the big next step. So getting a preliminary rendering of the actual project and then coalescing as part of our capital improvement plan around what we would be committing to doing and the path forward, because that's what any grant agency is going to want to know, is exactly what they're funding.
Right, because I don't want us to go down the path of creating a lap pool that only has 2 or 3 lanes, and we find out later that, you know, we have a growing demand for people who just want to swim laps as opposed to using the lazy river concept or, you know, having recreation for very young children at the expense of what happens now with some of the adults.
Yes, and really the feasibility study did look at that. So we are still proposing a 6-lane lap pool, and really the biggest change in footprint would be to the leisure pool, which is bumping out to the north and keeping the leisure pool component in the center and flanking it with a lazy river and a zero depth entry splash pad.
Okay.
So right now, that is the rough concept. I mean, maybe individual components of that are something that we're still fleshing out, like, you know, do you have a climbing wall or a slide or things like that. But when we're talking about getting second opinions of cost, that's the scope that we're presenting. And if we'd be looking at enhancing renderings or talking about design engineering, that's probably the scope that we're looking to go off of, simply because that's what came out of the feasibility study and asking stakeholders what they wanted.
I've seen a splash pad in the community where we have our boat over on the west side of the state, and that's really tremendously used by the young people that visit that park. Has anybody proposed the idea of first creating an outdoor splash pad, creating a water amenity then that would kind of tide people over while we did further work on the indoor water amenity? Just a thought. in
I
past.
think we've had discussions in the past about that. I mean, there's always been community interest in those splash pads. Again, that can be $1 million plus project just within itself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all right.
Something I was going to investigate and build on redesign.
Just an idea. All right,
Water.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, you have an additional 5 minutes if you'd like it.
Thank you. So when we start looking at other communities that have what I'll call like amenities, are they actual like amenities? Are we talking about a lazy river that would be the same size as ours? Are we just a much scaled down version of it? Because when you look at the diagrams, it looks vast. It's not going to be vast based on the footprint that we have, even with the bump out. And so I just want to make sure that we're being realistic of, does this match up to what Farmington has? Does this match up so that we're actually comparing like to like?
Sure. Well, I think that's a great point to make, because we don't need to be the size of Farmington Hill because we're not serving the population of Farmington Hills. We need to be able to serve our region. And what we're showing is, the regional draw is City of Saline, Pittsfield Township, Lodi Township, Saline Township, York Township.
And what are we looking at as numbers at that when we look?
I think off the top of my head, that's probably about 50,000 residents as an immediate service
School
area.
district.
Yeah,
You use
the school district.
Yeah.
So that's substantially bigger than the 10,000 of the city of
Yes.
Saline. And would a facility like that be able to accommodate that amount of people? Yes, they're not all going to come on the same Tuesday, but, I keep asking about this. If you're talking about that many people having memberships, because this is what is going to draw them there. Okay, I have a membership, and I get there, and it's like, sorry, we're full today. We've already hit our quota. I mean, how do we find that balance?
So that was looked at in the feasibility study, and they identified the total membership that we could accommodate as part of this growth. I mean, for context, if you notice in my report, we in pre-pandemic had, 4,600 members. We currently have about 3,000. So, I mean, that's almost 50% more growth that we could accommodate doing absolutely nothing just with our existing, because we know we've done it before. And that we're not busting at the seams when we had 4,600 members. So we know, not just from the theoretical study that Barry Dunn provided for us, but from our own practical experiences, that we have plenty of room for existing membership growth.
If we ever reach that point too, we could close our doors to those who are not considered residents, where we stop offering memberships, you just keep it resident only. Some communities do that, and they say you must be a resident, and either they price it out for non-residents, so it's just so ridiculously priced that
That's
you're
what
not going to purchase, yeah.
That's what Canton
That's what
does. Yeah,
Canton,
if you live in
exactly.
Canton, it's affordable. If you don't,
Yeah, they just price
you
it
might as
out.
well have a country club
Yeah.
membership. Yeah.
And that's a way that they can control the amount of users, if we were to get to that point, that those would be those decisions we would be making.
Yeah, I mean,
For
that's a classic supply and demand economics question that can be answered just through price structuring.
That's fine. So one of the things that I want to make sure is I love the idea of having our community having an amenity and such. That's a non-issue. It's at what cost? And what I'm very concerned about right now is that we keep throwing around this millage word. We can just have a millage. And, the mayor mentioned the other day, what if we increase our road millage? We already know that we need a fire millage. And what else is going to be coming down the pike? I mean, we're really taxing our people. And they're going to at some point say enough is enough. And so I want to understand, are we really looking holistically right now at this? Is this a want or is this a need? And I mean, what are we going to be able to actually afford?
So I want to clarify one point. Staff right now is not moving forward on the direction that a millage is happening. We haven't received that direction from council. So we are doing everything else that's been talked about, exploring every other option that's been talked about, mostly related to partnership, grants, opportunities, fundraising, things like that. So just to be clear, we are trying to find a path forward that does not involve a millage. Now, I will say this, I do not see a path forward for parks programs, like additional park improvements, without a millage, because that's even more money that would have to be exclusively out of general fund, and we just don't have that room in our general fund with all the other services that are covered underneath it.
And that's fine. I mean, I look at, what I was trying to figure out is one of the slides that has a white box on it.
That millage slide.
The millage slide. That one. So when we're looking at the white box where it says major improvement projects, are these things that we would use? Like, where is that funding source?
So those are things that could be funded from a local millage, and that is taken from our capital improvement planning from the last year.
Okay. Because what is now being called, for some reason, the Saline River Valley Trail, which was the Mill Pond Walk, just so that people know it's not a separate project, correct?
Correct.
That's already funded.
Phase one of it is. So the parks plan calls for us to have a regional connector trail, the heart of which would be that portion that runs through Mill Pond, which is why ultimately in talking with the county, who was helping us out through the Connecting Communities grant, we came up with a different naming for it, Saline River Valley Trail. The idea is that it would connect all the way up to Taft Park to the existing trail system in Pittsfield, and then through Mill Pond, Curtis, and Salt Springs to what may future be a county natural area outside of our city limits.
So I understand, okay. I just want to make sure that I understand what we're doing with these dollars. Because at one point, and I will keep going back to it, People's Park, we paved over Paradise, so we took out tennis courts with the promise that we were putting them back, and we never did. And then we reallocated the dollars, and now we've priced ourselves out. And so we've lost an amenity. And so, I mean, I just want to be very mindful about, where these dollars are getting allocated. We put a lot of effort and a lot of focus on Taft Park. That's our flagship park with the rec center. And we've sort of lost track of some of our other parks at times. And I want to make sure that we're looking at those too. And that it's not everything based on the rec center facility, whether it's the rec center building or that property. Because I do have a concern about that when we start talking about, where the dollars go.
Well, absolutely, and again, if a millage was something that this council, or really the 2024 council, had developed consensus around, it would be my recommendation that it be a parks millage and look holistically at meeting our needs inside the city's park system, not exclusive to Taft Park or the rec center, but holistically. And again, those are just examples that were taken from past discussions, capital improvement projects. It may look different when we actually sit down to talk about what a millage might look like in terms of serving the parks. But again, for the rec project at least, we are moving forward on the knowledge that there will not be a millage to supplement this. That may or may not happen in the future. It may or may not contribute part of the debt service, but we are looking for opportunities to fund it without that.
I'm going to stop there. We're well over 5 minutes. I appreciate that, though. We'll have time for another round of questions if there are still outstanding questions or concerns from council members. Mr. Gearbaugh, you have an additional 5 minutes if you'd like it.
Okay. For me, one of the things is dates and timelines. So even if you're not focusing on a millage, what are your timelines and cutoffs to actually respond back to us in terms of these potential authorities, joint ventures, or partnerships? And if you can come up with a time schedule for that.
So I want to be realistic. When you're talking about partnership opportunities, we have no control over the response times of outside agencies. All we can do is continue to put ourselves out in front, which we've already started doing. We've already had positive traction on early conversations. In terms of grant opportunities or direct appropriations, that funding cycle opens back up again. The grants are usually due in April of each year, I believe, and then the federal and state appropriations usually want to know by like March, April. So we're talking about spring to really aggressively go after grant or appropriation funding.
So in the next 4 to 5 months, basically.
Yeah.
Have it all wrapped up. Okay.
Well, 4 to 5 months, we should have a clearer picture of the opportunities that are available.
Then the one thing, because this is just like everything else, what other projects and things are being put to the back burner as you're doing this?
In terms of
Any of our
inside-
major projects, I have concerns with. We have the fire issues coming out of the fire services. We have not only trying to determine what we're doing for the downtown, but the rezoning approach and some of that activities, which I know are under Mr. Harrington's. But my concern is that often we've chased a number of projects as they become an emergency, and not only has the outcome not been good, but a lot of resources have been spent and wasted. And I want to make sure that you have sufficient time to understand exactly what we're foregoing in terms of what could potentially be either beneficial or harmful to the city.
Sure. As I've shared before, I feel like, my personal conjecture here, this is us getting ahead of council and not waiting until it's an emergency, which we know has happened in the past. This is the right fix at the right time. When we talk about asset management, this is a facility that we own. We have an obligation to maintain, and if we fail to maintain it, it will become an emergency in the future and consume far more of our time than we are investing now. Right now, we have the time, we have the space to think critically about it, to present opportunities, identify partners, identify solutions in a thoughtful way. And that's why I really started this presentation with, I want this to just be a conversation because there's no specific action we need at this time. There's no dire emergency that we have to get $7 million yesterday. Yes, we want to move forward thoughtfully and, with a certain degree of expediency because we think it's something that brings value to the community, and if the problem can be solved, will help us grow into the future and sustain us financially beyond that. But I don't personally feel like it's pulling my attention away from any other major projects simply because it is not an emergency issue right now. It is really something that we can spend time and think about.
I mean, from my perspective, it is an emergency issue because we're continuing to see if something should happen, a recession or another hiccup, we have significant draws on our fund balances that cannot be used to other things. My other concern is I want to make sure that our major projects, which are the infrastructures of this community, are the major projects that we're focusing in on. This rec center, I think there's other possible solutions which we haven't looked at besides the scenarios we have here, but you're right. If we move forward on this, the only solution really for this is revenue coming in from somewhere, and however we can get that at the soonest and the better is a priority from my perspective too. Then lastly, the only thing I have a question on is when we look at the engineering costs and some of these other developments, where's that money coming from? Because that's going to be significant.
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
The engineering funds, where's that money coming from? Are those grants available to maybe pay to fund for that instead of us having to take?
So yes, we would try to identify whether there was any available funding sources. If not, we would have to bring that back for a conversation. That's why right now I'm just looking for an estimate of the cost for what a design engineering proposal would look like.
And then lastly, the only other scenario I'd like to see, even though you mentioned on here going forward, I would like to see a scenario number 3 that actually has a debt service component to it that would bring the rec center back up to like new conditions, not necessarily adding all new things to it, but dealing with the deck. We already know those items are already listed as priorities that need to be done with the building right now. If we were to fix the building based upon on what we already have in our capital improvement, what would that mean in the end?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Almost exactly 5 minutes? Perfect. I don't think I have much to add. I do want to jump back to a comment that Mayor Pro Tem Dillon made, because if I was inarticulate, my apologies. I was simply asking for additional scenarios for the street millage. I wasn't advocating for increasing that. But I think as we look for renewal in the future, I think we owe it to our constituents, our business owners, to show them what, if we maintain it at 1 mil, what would that generate? What are we able to do? And then conversely, if we were to drop that down or to increase it, what more or less would we be able to accomplish as it relates to maintenance of our major and local streets. So I just want to be clear on that. If I was inarticulate at the last meeting, my apologies. I'm not sure I have much else on the rec center front. Well, I will add this. I think, at least from my perspective, as we look to the future, and we look at additional funding opportunities and potential to collaborate with some of our neighbors, one bit of data that will be very compelling to me is to better understand how the community feels and values, how the community feels and how they value the rec center. And so I think in the short term, actually the best thing that all of us around the table can do is to try and get those membership numbers as close to pre-pandemic levels as possible. One, because it shows community buy-in, it shows that the community values the facility and sees a tangible benefit to the city maintaining the facility. Conversely, from the financial perspective, it then requires less of a subsidy from our general fund to support the operations. So again, I'll emphasize, and I know I've shared this in the past, Sunshine and her staff have done a phenomenal job, in my judgment, over the past month, putting out a lot of promotional material online, on Facebook, on Instagram. The city has put it on our pages as well, and I strongly encourage you to share that, and also to talk to your neighbors, your family members, your coworkers, anybody who lives in the community, because, again, my judgment, and tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think I am, but the single best thing that can be done in the short term is to continue to work to get those membership numbers up to where they were pre-pandemic. Because where we were financially pre-pandemic was, by any objective measure, probably the best place we were in reference to the rec center since its inception in the early 1990s. So, if y'all want to respond to that, have at it.
Well, I'd like to reiterate, we need ambassadors. We need people to speak on behalf of the rec center, and just like the mayor stated, it takes all of us to spread the word and to invite people to stop in and see it in person. And I welcome each and every one of you to come on in, and I'd love to give you a tour around. Yeah.
With that, I was wondering if we could do like an open house for the community. Is that something that's feasible?
Yeah,
Or we could do an open
absolutely.
house? Maybe have
Yep.
some members there and they could talk to people about how they use the facility, things like that. I think, it's better coming from those who are using the facility, who are saying like, this is what I do. This is a benefit, rather than me as a council person saying, I think you should join the rec center. I think it should come from the people who are using it.
Yes.
Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, it's been a while. We have in the past. We have done open houses in the past. It's been quite some time.
Yeah.
Great idea.
I
Yep.
think the last one was for our last anniversary, our last significant milestone.
Yes. Yeah.
I think
For 30 years, yeah.
that's an excellent idea. I think we're due for
And things got refreshed during COVID. It looks fresher now,
Yep.
Yeah,
we
paint
painted
makes a
it.
huge
It's not
difference.
it's not
It makes a
peachy
huge
anymore.
difference.
Very peachy before.
Mm-hmm.
Councilman Rice, any additional, I'll do one last score round.
I do. So I just wanted to put a plug. So I can't do it because it's tomorrow. So Parks Commission for Washtenaw County meets at 2 p.m. every second Tuesday of the month. So that's tomorrow. But even bigger than that, they have a Parks Commission meeting tomorrow night from 6 to 7:30. It's their first public forum to provide input into their master plan. I strongly think if not one or two people needed there, and I can't do it, I apologize, but I'm
Yeah,
soliciting.
sounds like we can get some staff there.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I'm going to start marking these on my calendar. I think let's put our faces in front of them. And you can join virtually to their every Tuesday meeting as well. It's on their website.
Can I interject
Sure.
real quick, Councilman Rice? I think it was Councilman Delorico who made a reference to this earlier, or an inference rather. We've been successful in recent years getting additional dollars from Washtenaw County Parks, but long-term, I've said this ad nauseum, so my apologies. Long-term, we need somebody strong,
Yeah.
forceful, knowledgeable from the Saline community on that board. So, in addition to being ambassadors and talking to county officials about the need to invest and prioritize recreation in Saline, we need to continue to work to make sure that Saline is represented on that body. It's not accidental that the communities that have seats at that table see a significant investment in dollars in their municipalities.
Always. And you can apply for a board membership, and then we can start mentioning, hey, so-and-so applied for a board membership, and So if someone wants to take a lead on that, I can talk to the Parks Commission about this as well.
I do want to note, I did apply for membership on the County Parks Commission, and we were not accepted
Our
this year.
highest-
They,
our highest
yes,
level.
yeah.
Well, I will say, so they've got a couple of Washtenaw County, commissioners on there, but then they've got a lot of general public seats, so apply as a general public member.
Part of the issue is a lot of those general public seats have not turned over.
Yeah,
They just mostly renewed. the
Yeah,
membership.
some people have been on there many, many years.
Yeah. We
So
gotta
good
wait
for them and good for their communities. I'm not
Sure.
I'm not disparaging that. It's just that I think there'd be great value in having somebody from every geographic region of the county represented forcefully.
Honestly, there's 10 seats. It'd be so easy to do, right?
Goal or vision of the commission.
Seriously.
Happy for representation.
Absolutely. That
Anything else, Councilmember Rice? I apologize for interrupting.
Nope, that's all.
Mr. Delorco, anything else?
I don't have any.
Mr. Seal? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon? Sure you have mine.
Thank you. So just to clarify, we keep talking about there's some debt that's going to fall off, I believe, in 2025.
Correct.
It's 125,000?
108,000.
108.
And then the 125 falls off in FY '29.
Okay. So we're looking at just sort of perpetuating that. That debt would fall off and be replaced with new debt is what we're looking at right now?
Potentially, that could be one of the ways forward in terms of putting together this capital stack.
Okay. I guess the other piece that I want to sort of understand is we sort of keep referring to the mentality of if we build it, they will come. And we will get all the new memberships and life will go on and it's going to sustain itself. What happens when we hit a recession or we have another COVID-type situation? I mean, how does the city recover from that? Like, what would we do? I mean, we know where we are at the rec center right now, and it was unfortunately because of COVID and shutdowns and, ongoing costs, and we had to forego a lot to put money into that to sort of make them whole. And so I'm always nervous about, could that happen again? What would that look like? Because we're going to have a tremendous amount of debt with building this new facility.
So a couple points I want to touch on there. One, it's not my position. I don't feel like we're pitching a if you build it, they will come sort of mentality. I mean, the Barry Dunn feasibility study used empirical evidence, actual surveying of stakeholders, and provided an output that aligns with the needs and expectations of existing members and potential future members of the facility. So there's data behind their work, and frankly, they are experts in this field. They know when they say these things what to expect because they've done it other places. In terms of how you weather a potential economic recession or a future pandemic, one, there's a lot of lessons learned from the last time around. Certainly, there are operational things that you could do differently to reduce costs up front that weren't necessarily taken advantage at the time that the pandemic was ongoing. It's always easier in hindsight to comment on those sort of things and say what could be done differently. But what we need to do, what helped in the pandemic, is rebuilding the fund balance of the rec complex fund. And that involves needing to find ways to grow revenue to the facility now while we do have solid economic footing.
So one of the questions I have that we keep talking about the building, what about the actual full campus footprint? We build, we expand. Do we have enough parking? Are we going to lose amenities because we're bumping out, we're building on, we're doing this, we're doing that? I mean, are we looking at like very big picture right now as to say, okay, well, maybe our future plan, because we've talked tonight again about maybe a teen center, maybe a senior center. Those all need spaces, and you can't really always share space. I mean, because then somebody's without at some point.
So the campus does allow for more buildable area if we were ever in, that fortunate situation where we had additional partners that needed more space. I wouldn't be concerned about that. There is space to further develop and still meet our parking goals. I think if Community Development Director Harrington was here, he would remind us again that he feels the city of Saline is overparked in terms of our regulations for surface parking throughout the community. I can say anecdotally, we don't fill up the parking lots that are associated with the rec center now, and it's likely increasing membership 50% wouldn't do that either, just based on the daily vacancies within those two lots, particularly when you consider that there is the north lot as well for overflow parking.
So I guess where I'm going to end is sort of understanding if we move forward with this, what exactly is, and I think Mr. Gearbaugh talked about this, what exactly is our end game? Is it to have this facility? Is it to be a one-stop shop? Is it, because we keep talking about different things. At one point, we talked about even partnering with some sort of medical facility, having like some sort of PT, OT type thing there. We had talked about having a therapy pool. I mean, there have been so many different pieces, and then all of a sudden, it all came down to we're going to have a lazy river and an indoor, splash pad.
So it is very difficult to design and commit to a vision when you don't know who the partners are at the table are going to be. And that's the problem we're trying to solve right now. Who's sitting at the table with us? So I can't say that the vision will be exactly the same in a year if we identify different partners. What I know we need to do is represent the interests of our community, those being served currently by the facility, and this is what they've identified. So if the path forward is simply that we, as the city of Saline, try to make this vision happen, we have that data to support this is what members and stakeholders of the existing facility have identified. If different partners sit down at the table with us, that conversation may shift.
Okay. No, I'm glad that that's what I want to hear, is that we're not sort of,
No.
pigeonholing this is what it has to be, that we still have that fluidness to our design options. Then the next big question is, as we're closing out the year and we turn that corner of the calendar, we're going to start budgeting again. So what does that look like for the rec center? Like, what exactly are we going to do as a city as we start to just budget normal? Are we just going to just do status quo as to what we've done in the past and just sort of hope that this comes along? Are we going to do preemptive stuff and try to adjust the budget for that?
So I think staff has already gone after that preemptive, operational changes, improved efficiencies, cost-saving measures. We will be adding some more spots to camps, summer camps this year that will help a little bit with revenue. Obviously, we've increased the membership fees. That will help a little bit with revenue. We should have a better picture. It is our goal before the conclusion, at least, of our budget cycle, who's willing to have these conversations with us so that we can start planning for how that works. Now, again, I can't commit today that that will mean anything different for FY25, but it certainly may mean something different for FY26 or 27 into the future. And we're talking about debt service coming off in FY25 and debt service coming off in 29. If we can build these partnerships, it really is a short-term problem, a short-term gap for us to fill if within the next total fiscal year, so 18 months, we have solid partnerships in place or grant appropriations that have been identified. We're certainly in a financial situation where we could weather 2 more years of what we're doing now, and if we knew what the end goal was.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Gearbaugh, anything else?
Just one last question regarding the budget. So when I'm looking at this, even if we stick with scenario 3, going forward, we're committing $208,000 basically, or no more than that, sorry, $234,000 for debt service for the next 2 years, $325,000 annually for operations. And-
No, that would be if we took out debt. If you're talking,
Well, I'm looking at scenario number 3. It says the general fund commits to annual recurring numbers $325,000 annually, regardless of debt service obligations.
correct.
So
So
I'm
the
saying-
325 would be the general fund contribution, and that would cover the existing debt and the remaining operational gap.
So that
And then the two scenarios below it, 3A and 3B, look at different debt scenarios.
I'm reading, maybe I just read this again. The general fund commits to recurring annual commitment numbers of 325,000 annually, regardless of debt service obligations. You mean that includes the debt service?
No, it doesn't. It includes the existing debt service. I guess that should really say regardless of new debt service obligations.
That's what I want.
Yes,
But I mean,
yeah.
going forward, right now, without any debt, any more additional debt, we're committing $208,000 from, or $234,000 supporting our debt service on the facility. We need still to provide $325,000 annually for operations.
No, the 325 includes the debt service.
Okay, that includes new debt.
No, it includes the existing debt and the operating gap.
We'll talk later
Yeah.
about that.
So the 325 is about what we're contributing now in terms of paying for existing debt service and funding the operational gap at the rec complex fund.
And,
So that's more in line with scenario number 2.
all right, but if you recall, this year, we almost put $700,000 into the rec center. And we shifted off a number of expenses and so forth. I want to make sure that we're not continuing to absorb some of those expenses that were shifted as one-times into the new.
Yes, all of these shifted dollars. The only thing that's recurring in this budget cycle is the split that we've already talked about between parks and rec and staff time.
But then this 325, you're saying, includes the $234,000 of debt service.
Yes, in that scenario,
All right, so then we're only putting in another
roughly 100,000.
$100,000,
Yeah.
going back to where we were. Okay. That's it.
One last comment, and I know I sent this in an email, and my apologies for sending it later than perhaps you would have liked it. This is somewhat related, but also part of a broader conversation about city finances, debt, and future obligations. But still, at some point, ideally in the first quarter of 2024, would like to have a thorough analysis on the street bond that will be coming off the rolls in the ensuing years. I believe that was approved in 2004, 2005. It should be a 20-year bond. And as I indicated in an email, it may be advantageous for this body and the...
Lean board.
It may be advantageous for this body and the city to consider repackaging, rebranding, extending that. Perhaps, I'm not just thinking of the rec center, but just city operations more broadly. Because it wouldn't increase the tax burden on our residents and business owners.
And I believe that's the current .305 street debt millage that's on our summer millage.
Yes.
So, yeah, we can certainly get you the number of what that would generate and when it officially drops off.
Yeah, very good.
Can I ask you one question?
Please, Mr. Simmons.
So when is the dam study going to be expected, do we know?
About a year.
Yeah, probably another, probably late fall, early winter.
Okay. There'll be another drift in that
A lot of moving pieces, as I think the city manager made mention of earlier. So one last opportunity for my council colleagues to raise any questions or concerns this evening. Staff, do you care to make any additional comments at this time?
Nope.
The one ask that I would make, and you all saw the email, or assume you saw the email, Councilmember-elect Harmont was unable to be with us this evening. If you could please make sure that the supplemental material that was provided by staff and Mr. Dearbaugh is provided to her, and then obviously make yourselves available in the coming weeks if she has any questions or concerns. Because obviously, as an incoming member, she will have the opportunity to not only weigh in these issues, but vote when official action is warranted. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it. We'll refer back to the agenda. I guess at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to excuse the absence of Councilmember Kamara Sulak. Moved by CO. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Del Orco. All those in favor of excusing the absence, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it, the motion carries, I think that's what, is that 5-1? Yeah, 5-1. If there's nothing further to be brought before Saline City Council this evening, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn this work meeting at 7:39. Moved by Gearbox to adjourn. Was that second by Delorco or CO? CO, yeah, all right. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned. We'll see you next Monday. Thank you all.